Hey, fabulous listeners. We love getting reviews. We've said it before and we'll say it again. We really enjoy bringing you this podcast and we love hearing about it. So, for the month of March, if you do a review for A Magical Life, Health, Wealth and Weight Loss, you go into our competition, our draw for a $25 Amazon gift card. Yep, you heard it, $25 Amazon gift card. All you have to do is tell us what you think of the podcast, what episodes stand out to you, and we will pop you into our March 2023 draw, brought to you by Holistic Natural Health. Welcome to A Magical Life, Health, Wealth and Weight Loss. I'm your host, Magic Barclay, lead practitioner at Holistic Natural Health Australia and #1 best-selling author. In this podcast, I aim to give you practical tips on how to accelerate and sustain your health, increase your financial, spiritual and emotional wealth, and to look at something that haunts many of us needlessly, weight loss. In some episodes, I'll have guests available to give you even more tips, but in others, the floor is yours. Drop us a line at A Magical Life Podcast on Facebook and let me know what you would like to know more about. Now, sit back and enjoy, because it is time for you to create and truly discover a magical life. Welcome back to A Magical Life. I'm your host, Magic Barclay, and today I'm joined by Kimberley Record. Kimberley is a self-sabotage expert, and we're going to learn more about her as this episode continues. Kim is the author of the women's self-help book, Finding Your Forever Body, which is a 10-step guide to breaking the diet cycle for good. She's the founder of the Self-Care Success Formula, which helps ambitious, purpose-driven women break self-sabotaging habits so they can regain their energy and confidence and create more joy and fulfillment in their lives by their own standards. Combining her background in holistic nutrition and high-performance coaching, she empowers her clients to develop and stick to habits that support their health, vibrancy, and happiness without relying on their willpower. Welcome, Kim.
Thank you.
Now tell us about Finding Your Forever Body.
It was a book that came from a passion. I had been doing nutrition consulting for about 6 years. And in that time, I was still working through my own kind of recovery from a difficult relationship with food in my body. But the time that I was doing this nutrition consulting and was overcoming my own demons, so to speak, I was also noticing in women that I was coaching a lot of the same language and a lot of the same patterns that I'd gone through when I was really struggling the most, in this vicious diet cycle. So it came a point when I was just about in my 40s, several years recovered from this myself, and I started to look back on the journey that I'd had. And it actually happened one day because I didn't realize, it wasn't like it happened overnight, but one day I had this realization. I was sitting in complete gratitude one day for my body, and then had a flashback to 10 years earlier, or 10, 15 years earlier, when I was absolutely detesting what I saw in the mirror. And then that's what began the inquiry. Like, how did this happen? How did I go from looking in the mirror and picking apart everything that I saw to today having complete gratitude? And so it was that exploration that started the writing process for my book, Finding Your Forever Body. There was a lot of my own investment in my growth throughout that time too. So a lot of those pieces got brought in to that journey. And I put it into a simple 10-step guide for women who also struggle with it, because I saw that it was a very prominent problem.
It definitely is. And so now we're going to really apply what you know about this problem to how we can help people. So I ask all my guests the same three questions. Everyone gives me a different answer, and I think it's amazing, but no one's really, struck to the core of self-sabotage and why we do it. So your first question is, what can your expertise do to accelerate health, be it physical, emotional, or spiritual?
Yeah, so my specialty where I've really honed in my skills is working with women specifically who struggle with this on again, off again cycle. Another thing that I found in my nutrition consulting days was that, especially with women who came to me for general health things, I wasn't going into deep, pathological symptoms or anything like that. It was just mostly general health, and most of the time it was weight loss was part of their goals. And so, there was the realization of most people know generally what they need to do to maintain good health. They know what has worked for them in the past. The big problem is, why aren't they continuing to do it consistently over time? And so that's where I started diving into a little bit more of that mindset piece. And actually, through my discovery, I realized it goes even deeper than mindset. It goes really right down to a core level of self-worth for most women.
It really does. And I think that core level of self worth, we often tie that to our size. So whether we're too big, too small, too gangly, too muscular, too solid, we're always too something. And
Hmm.
that's what we tie our self worth to. So, what are some easy ways to stop doing that?
Yeah, well, the first the first thing is to acknowledge that it's happening, because a lot of times we get so programmed, we get so conditioned by messages everywhere. We're literally exposed to it everywhere, in media, social media, marketing messages, everyday conversations, because it gets perpetuated by everyday humans who hear these messages and then go on to repeat it, and to our children. I mean, it starts really, really early in life as well. You can hear it in children as young as 8-year-olds starting to make the comments that we hear adults saying, so it starts from a very young age, and we all get exposed to this conditioning. So the first step really is to acknowledge that it's happening, like catch ourselves when we are speaking that language, like that the I'm not enough language, and really begin to question the extent to which we've tied our worth into it, because all of us have experiences of valuing other people for much more than their external appearance or their image, right? All of us have these experiences of like loving other people unconditionally beyond the external. And yet there's this conditioning, this programming in ourselves that so much of our value and worth is tied into it. So, I think a big part of it is just awareness of the fact that it's happening, and then to start to detach from those standards, like start to question really what makes sense. And for me, it started quite young as well, because I was raised like, most North Americans to believe certain things about my image. And then it got really perpetuated when I was in my teens, and I was a model for a couple of years in my small hometown, and had an opportunity to go see a bigger modeling agency based out of Toronto in Canada. And in a 15-minute meeting was completely torn apart based on my image not being good enough. I was, according to their standards, I was overweight, and I was 5'9" and 137 pounds. So just right there, you can see the ridiculousness of the standards that are set for us. And this is the standard that is displayed everywhere, because models are the ones that are wearing the clothes and showing off the perfumes and all of that we consume in the images we see every day. So it wasn't a wake-up call immediately for me. I actually bought into it for a long time, and that's what kind of led me on my journey to struggling with my body image and my weight, and being obsessed with diets and the scale and all of that. And it was only upon reflection later that I realized how much that had impacted my life. But it wasn't just with my image. It happened in all areas. It happened with where I thought I needed to go to school, what kind of education I needed to have, when I thought I should be married, where I thought I should be working, what kind of job with benefits and steady income and all of that kind of thing. It's all of this social programming, and none of it fit with who I was and what I really valued. So it extends far beyond our image, but again, we've been programmed as women to tie so much of our value and worth into the image that is where most of us get stuck. We get stuck focused on this, but it is extending to all areas of our life, which sucks the joy and fulfillment and vibrancy and happiness right out of our days.
And that kind of leads me to the next question. You've partially answered it in that, many people look at models and go, well, that's what society deems acceptable, so I'm not it. Therefore, I've got a weight problem. And so many people battle their weight. Obviously, you had some battles as well. And I guess the listeners might want to know, what was the trigger to settling that weight battle? How did you accept the weight that you are, the weight that you should be? How did you kind of get off that treadmill? I mean, being in modeling, you were right in the firing line pretty much. And many of us are not models, and we're still comparing ourselves to what we see, on those glossy magazine pages.
Mm-hmm. Well, I quit modeling immediately after that experience because it was such a huge blow to my self-esteem at the time. So I left. I didn't ever get really involved into the industry after that, but it didn't stop me from being, like I said, being obsessed with diets and weighing myself, sometimes up to 6-7 times a day, and the number on the scale determining how happy and confident I would feel each day, depending on what was being displayed. How I finally overcame it was a bit of a combination of things, but I break it down into 2 steps. The first step really was to start understanding that food was more than calories. When I embarked into the holistic nutrition field, initially it was to help myself break free from this really difficult relationship that I'd had with food. I knew how much it was affecting my life, and it was really taking over in a lot of ways, where it became my sole focus and I couldn't focus on doing other things that I wanted, that I knew would bring me more joy. It was overwhelming and all consuming. So the first step was studying nutrition and having a better understanding, because up until that point, all of my education, and I'm giving air quotes right now, all of my education around nutrition was magazines and labels and diet books. It wasn't really based on any solid understanding of nutrition. And what happened in my holistic nutrition studies, and I'm so thankful that I chose the holistic route, which you can, I'm sure, understand, Magic, is, as opposed to studying dietetics, because that was one option for me at the time. But going the holistic route, I began to understand that there was so much more to our wellness than just what we put in our mouths. There was the mind, body, spirit connection that I had never even considered before. And my mind was blown open to understand everything that food actually did for our bodies, and the way that it nourished it and allowed our bodies to do things, and support our immune systems and improve our digestion. And as I started making little changes, feeling better, that started to become more important to me than the number on the scale. Because when I was in that vicious diet cycle, I was struggling constantly with my energy and digestion, and I was sick all the time, and I never felt good. And I was in my 20s, I should have had this vibrant energy, and I didn't. And so when I started to apply a lot of these nutrition concepts that I was learning, it was making just such a world of difference in my energy and slowly increasing my confidence as well, that the focus stopped being about measuring and counting, and just started being more about looking at quality, reading ingredients, starting to understand how our food is processed, and moving more towards whole natural live foods, which is what we were taught. And so that was the first piece. And the second piece was making a connection between my energy and where I wanted to go in my life. So there was a moment after I'd done the holistic nutrition studies where I was getting happier with my relationship with food and where that was going, but I was still miserable, still absolutely miserable in my life because I'd made a lot of choices, like I talked about earlier, based on the expectations and standards of others. And I was living a life that did not feel like my own. It didn't feel authentic to me. I didn't know what I wanted yet exactly because I'd never really been taught to explore and look at that there might be other opportunities that are more aligned. So making the first step towards something that felt more in alignment with my values and where I wanted to go was the next piece. And so when I started to put more focus onto that, the focus on the scale and the food and all of that just completely went to the wayside because I had a lot of major changes that I was making in my life. So I guess I just shifted the focus completely. And the result was that I had more energy and I didn't have to weigh myself anymore. And I didn't have to worry so much about the measuring of things because I just was enjoying my life a whole lot more and making conscious choices about the quality of food I was eating.
I think that's really key is not punishing yourself or depriving yourself, but making conscious choices. Now, we also talk about wealth here, Kim. So, what are your top three tips to creating wealth, not just financial, but personal and emotional wealth?
It's a great question. And I love that you talk about it in more than just the financial sense, because there is so much more to living a rich life than just what's in the wallet or the bank account. And I think when we apply the things that work, it benefits all areas of our lives anyway. So my three tips would be that the first one would be to, and I've alluded to this a lot in our conversation so far, but the first step would be to really consciously detach from expectations and standards that really don't align. The standards that you think success should look like, that you think health should look like, or that you think beauty should look like, because they may not be true for you. So if something doesn't feel right intuitively, explore that, detach from it. And then so that would lead into the second tip, which is to set your own standards that do align with your values and the vision of what you truly want for your life and what can bring you the most passion and joy and fulfillment. And then I would say also, not just setting the standards, but also developing metrics that make sense to you. Like, how are you going to measure your progress? How are you going to measure your results to know that you've had success according to your own standards? I think that's really important because, again, we've been taught to use things like maybe the number of investments or, the number on the scale or the number of years you've been married or whatever it is, depending on whatever, area of your life, right? There's these expectations that come from who knows where that you may have bought into that don't align, that aren't truly yours. So setting the standards and metrics for yourself, I think, are really important. And then the third piece I would say is absolutely critical is to create an environment for yourself of people who really support your vision and your standards and the life that you are creating and the stand that you're taking for yourself, because oftentimes it can be very difficult to live into it if we don't have the right people in our environment supporting it. Our environment's always stronger than our willpower. You may have heard that before. And if we have unconventional vision for ourselves, or we have unconventional goals that maybe don't fit the standards, we're going to hear that a lot from people all around us in our families and maybe old friendships, that people who aren't used to seeing you have a different vision for yourself. And it can be really easy to shrink back and just accept the old ways or the old standards and then go through your whole life being miserable because of it. So finding the people that you can surround yourself with that will really support you, coaches, mentors, communities that will help you to see possibility for yourself and stay in that vibration of possibility and excitement and belief. And sometimes we actually need to borrow belief from other people until we develop it ourselves, because again, the conditioning might be so strong from our whole lives that it is difficult to make those shifts. So I've always found coaches to be an incredible tool for this process, because they are people who lend you belief when you don't maybe have enough of it for yourself. So I think that those three things would be my 3 tips.
Fantastic. Now, Kim, we love freebies here. So people can get a 45-minute confidence kickstart call with you, and that's at kimberleyrecord.as.me/confidence kickstart. Listeners, that's a fantastic offer. I would definitely jump onto that, because how many of us value ourselves or determine our self-worth by what other people say, do, or think? And Kim can definitely help you. Listeners, you can find Kimberley at Instagram, Kimberley Record, and Facebook, Kimberley Record CHPC. Thanks for your time today, Kim.
Thanks so much for having me.
Pleasure. Now, in our next episode, Kimberley will be rejoining us, because we have so much more to delve into. We've only just touched the surface. So in 171, we're going to talk about detach from conditioning. Listeners, this was your episode 170. Go forth and create your magical life. Thanks for listening today. Please subscribe to hear future episodes, leave a review, and share this podcast. You can follow us on Facebook at A Magical Life Podcast, or at Holistic Natural Health Australia. That's holistic with a W. You can find us on Instagram at Holistic Natural Health, or at www.holisticnaturalhealth.com.au. That's where you'll access all sorts of articles, freebies, and more. Listeners, I hope you loved this episode as much as we did. Again, we want to remind you that we have our March 2023 competition going on, and all you have to do is leave a review on Apple or Spotify, or wherever you listen to this podcast, or even on our website, www.holisticnaturalhealth.com.au, and you will go into the draw for a $25 Amazon gift card. Yep, free giveaway. We love free stuff. You know we love freebies here. It's all waiting for you for March 2023, but hurry, this does close, so we will be notifying the lucky winner on the Holistic Natural Health Australia Instagram and Facebook pages. Stay tuned, good luck, and go leave those reviews and create your magical life.